Welcome to the Your Voice is Your Power podcast, where we are uplifting the voices and the stories of youth and young adults. We are continuing our conversation around navigating mental health and self-advocacy as a BIPOC youth. I'm very excited and honored and thrilled about the guests that we have with us today. Starting with Charles, he is a 21-year-old originally from Ryansburg, Ohio, and is currently a senior at Miami University of Ohio, majoring in biomedical engineering with a pre-medical studies co-major. In his free time, he loves to learn languages, play the piano, go on hikes and runs, volunteer in his community, and hang out with friends and family. Charles is very passionate about destigmatizing mental health illnesses and is currently a member of the Miami University's chapter of Active Minds. Shay is a second-year psychology major at the University of Texas. He's excited to be continuing his advocacy journey as an intern at Active Minds K-12 team this spring and hopes to do more work to support mental health of young men like himself. Charles and Shay, thank you for joining us. Just simply starting off, how y'all doing?
Doing pretty good today. Thank you for asking.
Guys, how are you?
I'm doing fairly well. I appreciate you asking. Happy Black History Month to you, to those who are listening. A very, very excited time. But like I mentioned earlier, we are continuing our conversation around navigating mental health and self-advocacy as BIPOC youth. In our last episode, we had the fortune of speaking with Chigozie and Nicole, who gave us some wonderful insights of what it means to be a young mental health advocate. What does it mean to be a BIPOC young mental health advocate? So Charles and Shay, your stories are just as amazing. Your work is just as impactful already at such a young age. So I'm excited to deep dive into this conversation with you, just like I did with Nicole and Chigozie. So to get started, can you just kind of share a moment when you first became aware of the importance of mental health in your own life?
I can go first. I think that for me, I've always obviously had some awareness of like my mental health and my feelings, but really when it first struck me was in high school when I was a section leader in my marching band. I think that experience did it for me because it was getting to see how being a leader and how much mental health mattered as a young leader, especially as a young BIPOC leader, and all the stresses and challenges that came with that. And it made me realize that being a servant leader and in service of others, you can't help other people until you take care of your own mental health. So I think it brought a lot of awareness. Like if I was having a bad day or a rough time with my mental health, now, not only did that start to affect me, but it affected everybody and all of my peers that I was kind of responsible for taking care of. So that's when, for me, I started to realize I need to make sure that every day I'm in the right sort of headspace and mental state, because it's not just me being affected anymore. It's everyone else on my team, sort of.
Yeah, and for me, I would say that it started around when I was 14, 15 years old. I had a friend at the time who was really struggling with their mental health, and they confided in me and let me know that they were considering taking their life. And that was something that I had never really had any experience with before. And I was really caught off guard at the moment of how to handle things. And luckily, I had another friend at the time who was there to help me realize, this is a good moment to do a safety check and call the people that are needed to check in on my friend and make sure they were okay. And after that experience, I really felt like there was a need to, I don't know, make young people more aware of what's out there and what they can do to help other people in that kind of situation. So from that, I ended up joining my student council later on, where I planned one of my school's very first mental health awareness weeks, where we talked about different resources that were offered and really reminded students that they weren't alone. And especially after that very first annual mental health week, I was able to see the impact that something like that can have, as some of my friends in the hallway would tell me that they were really happy that we had different days for different mental health illnesses and how they learned something new. So really just getting that experience from other people helped me realize why we need to continue doing what we're doing and that it has real impacts.
I mean, it already speaks to, the fact that both of you are young advocates in your own right, the fact that your stories also involve others, and kind of this realization of the importance of taking necessary steps to start to advocate for your own mental health is very, very key. I'm curious, as two young men of color and mental health advocates, you're navigating the real world, you're navigating collegiate space. Have you had to challenge stigma or misconceptions about mental health within your own community, and how did you approach that?
I think for me, I would definitely say for sure. And I think it's also like interesting to realize that there's different stigmas in every community. And for me, I can speak from obviously the like Indian and kind of Asian American experience of stigma around mental health and the immigrant kind of stigma around mental health. I feel like there's been this idea in the Asian community and amongst immigrants of like specifically when immigrating to America, a lot of it is about that model minority concept and putting your head down and just working hard and staying in the shadows, not speaking out, not speaking up, and just working hard so you can find success and move up and basically not causing trouble. And I feel like in turn, that's made, a lot of like first generation parents and now like you like myself that were born here were always taught to kind of suppress your emotions and feelings like because like I said speaking out is not seen as a good thing, and I saw that a lot in high school and even now in college surrounded by a lot of very high achieving people who are very successful in academics and all their other pursuits doing all these great things but at the same time not taking the time to take care of their mental health because they were never taught that. So I feel like I'm almost always finding that challenge and really just getting my friends to recognize that like your mental health does matter and it's okay not to, be perfect at everything or it's okay to take breaks and not always be constantly busy and working hard. So I feel like for me that's the sort of specific stigma that I've had to challenge in my life.
And for me, I would say that I really felt the stigma most as I was growing up, and it wasn't through anyone directly, saying its mental health is bad or anything like that, but it was all of the indirect ways that people would let me know that, as a man and as a black man, that there are certain ways you should act, certain ways that you should handle stress and sadness. And I really felt like there was a certain way that I had to act to fit that mold. And it wasn't until I got to college where I was able to join an organization for other Black students on campus, for other Black men, where I realized that I'm not the only one that felt that way growing up, and that a lot of other people felt that way too, and that there are people out here who have let go of that stigma, who are in therapy, who are getting the help that they need if they feel like they need it. And yeah, I really just feel like finding that community helped me realize that that stigma I was feeling wasn't something that only I was feeling, and that there are young people now and older people who are really focusing on trying to get rid of it and keep that space open so that if anyone needs help, they can get it.
Yeah, I can only imagine there's so many people who are listening to us right now can resonate with both of those. As a person of color, uh, as a male, oftentimes it's like, okay, this overperformance. Not only do I have to compete, but I got to represent my identity. I have to represent my culture. And then the stigma around what it means to be a man and, uh, what you should be able to put up with and what you should be able to deal with. So I really applaud both of you to speaking to those things because I can resonate with both of them. I mean, even as I am older than the two of you, it is still something that comes up from time to time, right? And something that you have to be conscious of. And definitely, you have to take steps to be self-aware and self-advocate when those things come to the forefront. I mean, you both have mentioned school. You both are in college right now, highly involved, highly active. Talk to me about what role has educators in school, even mental health professionals, played in creating a supportive environment for you, and if it hasn't been there, what are some of the steps you've taken to kind of create that supportive environment within the educational space?
I think for me, I can say that I've noticed like a shift somewhat recently to where there's always like mental health resources are starting to be pushed out more and promoted and made available, whether it's through like just like weekly emails and reminders. Here at University of Texas, we even have like a text system reminder that is kind of self-care focused. So that's been good. So I have seen a recent shift, I think, since the pandemic towards that stuff picking up. I would also say that some of it feels very targeted towards like certain individual. Like I know you talked about how us as men have to almost fight a different battle in some sense when it comes to our mental health. So I feel like it's definitely there on campus for some groups, like for people in, the liberal arts majors and stuff like that. It's very much talked about, but at the same time, we've had unfortunately several like instances of suicide in like fraternities or like, STEM majors and pre-med and engineering kids who are just constantly stressed and don't get that reminder about mental health. So I would say I'm sure this is not just a phenomenon at my school. I imagine across the country, it's about making sure that every single person and even groups you would typically think are usually supported may not be supported when it comes to mental health specifically.
I would say that my school has had a huge impact on my mental health, and I am really happy with how far we've come in terms of advocacy here. There's still a long way to go because I see myself fortunate to be in the mental health sphere. So naturally, I know all of the resources and everything that's available to help me, and I try to share that as well. So when I struggle with my own mental health, I know exactly where to go. And I think the goal my university is trying to do and my chapter of Active Minds is trying to do is make sure that everyone feels that way. That, if you're feeling like you're stressed with just a little thing, you know that there's dog therapy on Monday. Maybe if it's something more serious, you have the number for student counseling, trying to get things like that more solidified. And I also really like how my school has been um, really cultivating a place for diverse individuals. About 3 years ago, my school started its first club for just Black men to have that space to talk about different things. And one part of that club is that every semester there's a mental health check-in, and that's really helpful because there are certain experiences that you go through as a Black man and a PWI that not everyone can relate to. So having that space where you can be open about what you're going through and having people that can directly relate to what you're experiencing can be transformative for someone's mental health. I know it's been transformative for me.
Yeah, Charles, I really applaud you for being active in creating those spaces. And, to anyone who's listening, and you may not have that space currently at your high school or within your college, like Active Minds is here to support you in that. You can start a chapter today to really create a space in which your mental health is prioritized, in which individuals who identify as you, who look like you, who have the same experiences as you, have that space. If it doesn't currently exist, because it's key. And Charles, it's really exciting to hear how your university is taking steps to create specific spaces, because it really does make a difference. A sense of belonging is key to positive and healthy mental outcomes, especially as you're navigating college as an independent young adult. What advice would you give to a young person who is listening to us right now? They feel alone, unheard when they're trying to advocate for their own mental well-being.
Something that I would say is to take a moment to reflect on like what you're really going through. And in that moment, seeing if you are able to identify anyone in your circle that can be a mentor for you. I really think having a mentor can help with your own self advocacy because you could talk to someone who's been through what you've been through before, even if it's not the exact same thing, it could be close. And what I like about finding that mentor is that they don't necessarily have to be someone at your school. If you go to a smaller school and maybe don't have that many people, maybe you could find a mentor at a different university or a mentor that works in industry and something different, something like that, where you can have this person to kind of help you through that self advocacy. So then you come out stronger on the end. And then one day you could do the same for someone else.
Yeah, I really echo all of that, what Charles said. I think the biggest thing as I kind of get started with my advocacy journey too has been having mentors and especially male mentors who know what I've been through has been the biggest piece in supporting my advocacy. And just to add on, I would say, because I know you mentioned that feeling of being alone or unheard is a common feeling, but I feel which is definitely valid. But I think it's also a sometimes a reality we create for ourselves. So I would say don't be afraid to reach out to people who you think might not be interested in helping you with this, because the reality is everyone has gone through struggles with their mental health or similar experiences, especially if there's someone who looks like you and an older person. You would probably be surprised how willing they are to actually support you and your goals.
Yeah, again, I think what both of you said is so key. Charles, this idea of seeking a mentor. Uh, Oftentimes we think that that has to be someone who's in the field that we want or in the career that we want, or very for a lack of a better word right now, superficial, but it could be someone who's modeling healthy habits. And that's a mentor, like for a specific reason. You can have multiple mentors. And I'm speaking as somebody who, like, for the longest time lacked that area and then really figured out the benefits of having somebody who's had those experiences, to your point, Shay, has a little bit more life experience and can kind of not live life for you, but definitely help you navigate some of those things. And then Shay, that piece around, you know, kind of almost taking this risk is like, I'm not sure if this person is going to actually respond, but like, I don't know until I ask. Is so key. And it is a way to combat that false narrative of feeling like you're alone when oftentimes, as you named, you're not. Kind of switching subjects a little bit, but thinking about some of the barriers and some of the systemic challenges that are in the way as we navigate mental health as a self advocate, as BIPOC youth. I want to talk a little bit about social media. How do you think social media and online communication has helped and or hindered, mental health conversations for young people of color?
I think the hard thing with social media is that there's not much of a filter. So with it, you can be exposed to so many different viewpoints, especially very extreme viewpoints, since people, can hide behind a screen. They don't have to show their face when they're saying things that they're saying. So I think that really can make social media a challenging space to advocate for mental health. But I also think it's a good thing too, because you can reach so many people with social media. You can really find different communities, different niches that can make you feel like you're not alone, even if there's no one in your area that has a similar interest to you or has gone through this experience. You can watch or be a part of someone else's experience. And I know YouTube is great for that, because for myself, there's been times where, I wanted maybe a little bit of empathy with the situation that I was going through, but maybe I didn't necessarily want to talk to anyone. And it has been helpful that I could just search on YouTube, like, oh, I'm like struggling with this, and there's someone else online who already made a video, and I'm like, okay, well, I know I'm not the only one who has dealt with this. So I think it's a pro and a con, that we have social media, but overall, I think we're probably better that we have it, even with all of the cons.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment, and like in a similar sense about people being able to hide behind the screen and say whatever they want. I think obviously there's a lot of negatives with that, but I think in a way for specifically mental health advocacy, that could be a good thing, because mental health usually isn't something people are willing to just bring up in their face-to-face conversations every day when they see people. But on social media, you can start to say more things that maybe you wouldn't be willing to put out there in certain spaces, because you do have that protection. So in a way, with something that's stigmatized like mental health, I think it is a good thing that you don't even have to really put your face out there, especially as a man. When no one likes us to talk about our feelings and emotions, but on social media, you can put something out there and no one has to know your race, your gender, anything like that. So I think in a cool way, it can be good. But as Charles said, there's also a lot of negatives when it comes to extremism, and especially as BIPOC youth, we're exposed to a lot of negative things and hate on social media. So it's finding that balance at the end of the day.
No, I totally agree with that, and it's that balance piece. And Charles, you're absolutely right in the sense of there are oftentimes resources that are really really useful. And I mean, think about us in this conversation. We're recording this conversation. We're going to upload it to YouTube. We want people to watch it. We want people to share it. We hope that people benefit from it. So it's not like shut off all social media, but it is around that balance and being conscious around what are you taking in, um, how do you feel as you're taking these things in, and even being conscious around how much time you're spending on certain platforms. Until your point, Charles, like what actual content am I actually taking in? Am I looking for something that's going to specifically uplift me or talk about this thing that I'm experiencing? Or to your point, Shay, have I fallen into this trap around finding things that are harmful, finding things that are negative, or even perpetuating stereotypes or stigmas on me? It is a key. Balance is definitely key. And being intentional about how you use social media, I think, is an incredible point, Charles. In the sense of like making it a tool for your mental health and not something that is depleting it or putting you into a place of negative feelings or feelings of isolation, of loneliness. Or one of the things that I know a lot of youth deal with is this comparison piece, because oftentimes what is put out in front of you is what people want to see, is not often the reality. Shay, you hit on something that I definitely want to talk a little bit about. Is like, okay, as not just BIPOC youth, but as young men, as young men of color, this idea of navigating your feelings, navigating your mental health, knowing when to share, knowing when to hold back. You both are advocates, and oftentimes in self-advocacy, part of that work is talking about yourself, is sharing parts of your journey, is allowing other people to know that they're not alone. How do you balance the need to both be vulnerable as well as be vulnerable, but also balance the some of the expectations that come with being a young man of color?
Oh yeah, that's actually something I've been thinking about. I mean, the short answer is, to be honest, I still don't know because it's something I'm still dealing with and trying to navigate through every day. I think the important thing is about, kind of like we talked about, finding those people that you can really trust in your circle, and like finding mentors and older people, so that knowing that when you do open up to people, because I feel like a lot of times the reason young men don't open up is because then that turns into something that can potentially be used against them if it's not sharing those feelings with the right person. So I usually always, like, I feel like I have my circle of like my closest like two or three friends, and I feel like I've always had that where it's like I know I can tell this person this about my feelings and share my feelings, and that won't be frowned upon. And that's another key piece too. At the end of the day, um realizing that being yourself is always the best thing that you can do, and trying not trying so hard to put up that front, because there are people, the people who really matter will appreciate, I think, the vulnerability that you showcase.
I 100% agree with that. And I really like what you said about how you need to have that community of people that you feel like you can be 100% yourself with. Yeah, I echo that 100%. And something I would like to add is I know from like an Active Mind standpoint, in my time when I was the co-president of Active Mind, something that I really tried to do was intentionally create that space where people do feel comfortable to open up. And what I've realized through my co-presidency is that it's not something that will come at the first meeting. Maybe it'll come at the second or the third meeting. But as people start to realize that this is a place that they can go to, and whatever is said in this room is not going to be repeated outside of this room, that's when people start to open up. And I remember one thing that really made me happy that I was like hosting these kind of meetings was that one student, opened up and was like, to be honest, this first month at this university has been so difficult for me adjusting to a new way of living, not being with my parents. And then another person in the room was like, I 100% feel the same way. And like by giving people that space, they were able to have that sense of community and that they weren't going through things alone. So if anyone out there is really like trying to be a good self advocate and hold meetings like that, I would be intentional about creating that space that people feel comfortable opening up.
Yeah, I love that. Creating this space, because you can create this space. You have a right to create a space for yourself and for those that you want to bring into the fold. And then Shay, that piece around that space being an authentic place, that place where you can truly be your 100% authentic self. That's when you are able to open up. That's when more people are able to open up. To your point, Charles, and there's so much good that can come from just being in a space, being authentic and sharing. so much good that can come from that. Again, that feeling of loneliness, that feeling of I am the only one going through that, can immediately be eliminated in a space like that. I'm thinking about, earlier when you both were talking about your institutions and some of the resources that are there, and even the specificity around that specific club and space, Charles, or Shay, to your point around allowing more people to see themselves within those resources. Thinking about barriers and systemic challenges, in what ways do you think mental health resources and services are lacking for BIPOC youth?
I think that some of them are lacking in the sense that specifically for BIPOC youth is understanding, like I kind of touched on before, that every culture has a different sort of stigma around mental health. So in that sense, everyone in a way is dealing with very different mental health issues. And I feel like right now, a lot of mental health resources are more generally focused, which is great, and they're great tools. But I think now that the conversations are becoming more widespread, it would be good to have specific resources for specific cultures. I mean, sometimes I don't even like the term BIPOC because, again, that's grouping together a large number of people. But obviously, I can say the Asian American experience is very different than the Black American experience. And so it's about finding, resources and even mental health care providers that meet your specific experience and stressors in life that you've had to deal with. I would say is something we could work to expand on for sure.
I also agree that like there's so many resources out there, but I think there's still a lot that can be done to make more resources. And then even with the resources that are out there, making sure that they're getting to the people that need them. I forgot what the exact statistic is, but there's not that many Black psychiatrists. So if you are a Black individual and you want a psychiatrist that you feel like can relate to your experience as a Black person in America more, it's going to be hard to like find that person than if you are part of a different racial group. So I think working hard to try to close those barriers, encouraging more people of color who feel called to go into mental health, supporting them through that process of getting there, because we all know it's not easy to get through the years of schooling it takes to work in these mental health roles. But then also for all of the resources that we do have out here, making sure that people know about them. I think that's a big disconnect in a lot of universities and also just in the general, adult world when trying to make sure that people have the help that they need. And I've talked to a lot of different other people in this space, and I think we're all working hard to close that gap the best that we can, sending out the emails, holding the meetings. And I think we just have to keep going and keep working together, keep communicating with one another so that if someone else finds a way that reaches more people, then maybe we all can start using that. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the topic.
I appreciate that, Charles. And you kind of led right into my next question, in the sense of like, you name, there are resources. Oftentimes people don't know about the resources, or even Shay, I'm still thinking about that point around the resources there, but do I see myself within that resource? So I think that resource is available for me as young self advocates, mental health advocates. What are some of the resources that you use? What are some of the resources that you would potentially share with someone who's looking for mental health resources for themselves or to further their advocacy work?
I can go first. So I have a unique stance on this because I do work for the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So I'm always advocating for people to call that number if they feel like they need to. A lot of places also have what they call like a warm line. So you can go and just talk to someone, even if you might not be at that suicidal stage, you can still have someone to talk to. But let's say your community doesn't have a warm line, I would still advocate for you to talk to the hotline or to text the number, because just having that direct empathy from someone on the other end of the line can just do wonders for your mental health. And people all like usually think that they need to call that line if they're on the edge of doing something, but that's not true. Like you can call if you just had a really bad day and you feel like you have nobody else to talk to and you're so alone. Please call that number. Someone will be there to listen to you and make you realize you are not crazy. Like things in life are hard and you need someone to tell you, yeah, you went through a hard day and it's okay to completely feel this way. And I'm glad that you're opening the space on this podcast for announcements like that to be made, because I want to share a little funny story, not funny, but informative story, that when I was working at the hotline about 3 months ago, I was helping one of the people train. And we got a caller who was going through a lot of intense emotional things in their life, and at the end of the call they felt so much better. They were like, I'm going to reach out to a therapist. We helped them find therapists in their area, and they said that they found out about the hotline through a Dance Moms episode, because they did a dance with the number. And that just goes to show that, like, it really can help. So I do encourage you, if you are feeling like you've just gone through so much, please call, because you never know how it can make you feel better.
Yeah, I love that last piece about like how it doesn't need to be you're on the edge and suicidal, it can literally be anything. I think more people really need to realize that when we talk about using mental health resources, like you said, Tyrell, is this for me? I think people need to realize it's for everybody. Everybody has mental health. And even when you think like that's something I've come to the realization recently, is even though I've lived my life thinking, oh, like I'm like normal for lack of a better word, like I don't have like any, mental illnesses or anything, that doesn't mean that my mental health is perfect or even okay. So I think it's about understanding that you can use all of these resources whenever. And I would encourage people, like, you don't need to go to therapy just because something wrong with you. You should go to therapy as almost just to keep checking in on yourself and keep having those conversations with yourself. So like I know my college therapy is for the most part a free resource, at least for that initial meeting or that initial talk to bring awareness to yourself. So I'd absolutely encourage people, even if it's just once a month, going to see like your campus counselor or whatever it is, because those resources definitely are there. You just have to make the effort to go seek them.
Exactly. And I wanted to add one more thing to that too, is kind of going back at it, like with advocating for other people as well, is that you can use those resources to advocate for your friends too. If you know your school has counseling services, you can, learn more about the counseling services for yourself to give to your friend. That plays an important role as well, especially if you want to be a leader in mental health too, to know what's out there and how to kind of distribute that information. And to kind of plug the hotline one more time, a lot of people have utilized it for their friends as well. That's something I wish I would have known about when my friend confided in me back when I was 14 years old. And it can just take the stress off of you, especially if you were like someone who's 20, who's never had to deal with a situation like that, and you have a friend who is struggling. That's a lot for you to handle. You should reach out. You should have someone who is trained and has dealt with that before to help you. I've had multiple people call and say, like, oh, I'm texting my friend, like, this is what they're saying. And we work together to try to help their friends. So if you ever feel like your friend's struggling and you don't know what to do, again, it doesn't have to be their suicidal situation. It could be they're going through a really hard time and you just really don't know how to connect with them at this moment. Please utilize that resource and any other resources that your campus might have or that you might be able to use to help your friends.
I think it's so key what you both are saying in terms of one, the resource is for you. You have a right to access. The resources can be used for those that are close to you. And then we want to use these resources to be preventative, not as a response to something drastic or something dire. Because oftentimes by that time, it is more than what we can do. It is beyond what we are capable or even should be responding to. But if we are using the resources, the moment that we see something, the moment that it feels off, the moment that we're having a bad day, the moment that we see our friend is having a bad day, that's when the resource can actually be very impactful. I think about Ask. I think about our tool, our Active Minds tool of acknowledge, support, and keep in touch. Simply a framework for how do you go about communicating with those that you care about and that you're closest to. It is a tool that can be used the moment that you feel that your friend's having a bad day. You're not actually sure how to go about supporting them in that moment. To your point, it's not when they've gone so far that they are experiencing a mental health crisis. We want to support them before they get to that crisis. So one tool that you can use is our Ask model. So go to ask-to-help.com. It's a free digital experience, and it's a beautiful tool to help support those that you are closest with and that you want to kind of monitor and just make sure that they always know that you're there for them. I really, really, really appreciate both of those points, Charles and Shay. Kind of coming to a close somewhat, I want to close out with two questions. One, what's one message that you would like to share with a young person of color who's struggling with their mental health but may be afraid to speak up?
I would just share that, again, going back to that thing of mental health is something everyone deals with and everyone struggles with, whether they're willing to admit it or not. Like, I can be vulnerable for a second here and say that college honestly hasn't been the easiest transition for me. And I feel like I say this today because people from the outside might see, what do you mean you're at this big university? Technically, it's rated like one of the top in the country. You seem to be in a lot of organizations. You seem to have these friends. You seem to be going out and doing this or that. But at the end of the day, mental health isn't something that's controlled by all of those external factors. It's something that you feel internally and you can't help that. So I'd just say understand that, again, going back to my point of you're never as alone as you think you are. And like we've been talking about this entire time, if you do feel that way, all of those resources are available. You just have to make the effort to go seek them. And that's something I honestly am trying to do a much better job now in my own life to combat the stuff I talked about.
Yeah, I 100% agree. There's been so many moments in college where I've been humbled and I've questioned, and everyone on the outside might think, oh, you're doing so well, like you should be happy. But yeah, mental health is different for everybody, and everyone processes different stressful events very differently. So, one thing I like to say that, if you feel like you want to speak up, but right now is not the time, that's okay too. It's okay to focus on yourself for a little bit. And navigate what mental health looks like for you. And the more you learn about yourself and how you navigate it, the more that you might be able to help someone else because, it's not just you know, one trick fixes it for everybody. So little things you learn that you can share when you get into that advocacy role could really end up helping someone later down the road. And will kind of go back to talking about finding that mentor that can help you. There might be a psychologist at your school or at your institution, or someone that works in mental health in some sort, maybe a professor that can be that mentor for you and help you start advocating. Maybe someone who has already advocated. Maybe you follow someone on social media who might be a smaller creator who's advocating for mental health, maybe reaching out to them and like learning from them. But I really think it's important to have that person or have that community that can help you get to that advocacy role so that you can be in a place where you can then help other people.
Appreciate you both for being so open and for sharing that. Last question, kind of self reflection, but also one that I know our viewers are going to appreciate and be able to take away some important learnings. Again, you both are young BIPOC mental health advocates. So not only are you daily focusing on your own mental health, you are out there advocating for important issues. You're advocating for your peers. If you could go back and give your younger self, maybe we're talking 2, 3, 4 years ago, as you both are still very young men who are still doing very impactful work. But it's so exciting because you have so much more to go. But if you could go back and give your younger self uh, uh, some advice about navigating mental health and self advocacy, maybe that middle schooler, maybe that freshman in high school, what would you say?
I think I would say something I because I feel like, as I mentioned, I was lucky to have, supportive parents and people who, like mental health was not a shied away topic in my childhood. So I think I always kind of had that mentality of the motto, it's okay not to be okay. And I think I knew that and understood that. But I think sometimes I live by that a bit too strong. Like I would say, okay, it's okay not to be okay. So I'm just going to choose to not be okay. And I'm going to continue to go through things and let things build up. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, this is normal. Like it's okay to feel this way. And it is normal and it is okay to feel that way. But also, I've realized now it's important not to let stuff build up and fester to like it shouldn't be impacting you in such a way to where it prevents you from being able to go through your daily life. And if that is happening, it's important to, as we've been discussing, go take the steps to seek out resources and not just stay feeling sad. Like, don't get too high or too low, and always just keep track of where your mental health is at.
And if I could go back to my freshman year of college, I would tell myself to make sure I prioritize community because I think, I fell into the trap, and I know there are other people out there that fell into this trap too of getting too busy that you don't put it first, or not even first, but like at least in the top three. I would tell
Prioritize it.
myself, yes, prioritize it. Like I would focus so much on school and being in leadership positions and trying to have an impact, but you need to have those people that you can fall back on to. And luckily, I had friends that could help me navigate it. But I think my life would have been so much easier if I would have, from the beginning, really put the effort into finding a community of people that could understand what I'm going through as I navigated college. So that's what I would recommend to everybody. If you can, maybe that community is not at your university, but maybe it's, you know, close friends that you have, or like we kind of touched on before with the online community, something like that. Really prioritize and have those people that you can count on when times get tough.
I mean, Charles and Shay, I really, really, really appreciate both of you. You are both phenomenal individuals. You are very intelligent, and I'm excited that you guys have chosen to be mental health advocates because I know all that you do in your future endeavors will be impactful for many. Just kind of looking back at my notes that I took, kind of three takeaways that I'm holding on to that I hope our listeners hold on to is one is that importance of finding a mentor, finding a person that is modeling some of those healthy habits, someone who's had that lived experience, someone who has a shared identity or shared experience that you can potentially lean into. And as Shay said, it's okay to be afraid of maybe thinking that person won't want to play that role. Maybe they don't have the time, but it's okay to ask. The other one was around finding a space to be your authentic self. So whether that space is one that already exists or whether it's one that you have to create, allowing that space to be a place where you are 100% yourself, allowing others to be themselves 100%, allowing that shared allowing the sharing of that space to eliminate the feelings of loneliness, isolation, the false narrative of that you are the only one going through this. And then the last one is the resource is for you. You have a right to access. And so whether or not you actually see yourself in that resource, as Charles said, we all have mental health. So we all have a right to seek resources that are prioritizing and helping us ensure that our mental health is just as prioritized as our physical health. I really, 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 Charles and Shay, look forward to having another conversation with y'all in the future. Again, shout out to you for taking time out of your busy schedules for having this conversation. I know so many young people are going to hear this and be impacted by the wisdom that you shared, by the stories that you shared, by your level of vulnerability. So I really, really appreciate you both and wish you much, much luck as you are finishing out the rest of the semester.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for having us.